In Shanghai, there is a train that seems to break one of the most basic rules of transportation. You can stand beside the track and watch it leave the station. There is no familiar clatter of wheels, no steel wheels grinding against steel rails. And as the train accelerates, something becomes even stranger. It doesn't seem to be rolling at all. It's floating. In 2004, the Shanghai Maglev began carrying passengers between the city and Pudong Airport, reaching speeds of around 430 kilometers per hour on its fastest services. For a passenger sitting inside, the experience can feel almost unreal. The landscape outside starts disappearing. The train keeps accelerating. But underneath you, there are no ordinary wheels pushing against a rail. So what exactly is holding several hundred tons of steel above the track? And if nothing is touching the rails, what is actually pushing the train forward? The answer isn't hidden inside a more powerful engine. It's hidden in the track itself. Because a maglev train isn't really a train riding on a track in the traditional sense. The train and the track are one giant machine. And once you understand what the magnets are actually doing, that strange gap beneath a floating train suddenly starts to make perfect sense. Let's get into it right here on Small Things. Magnets, not wheels. That gap isn't a trick of the camera angle or a strange coincidence of the lighting in the shot. The train really is floating, held there entirely by magnets built into both the train itself and the guideway underneath it. Nothing mechanical is holding the train up at all. No wheels, no axles pressing down on anything solid beneath them anywhere. Just magnetic force, invisible to anyone watching, quietly doing the entire job a set of steel wheels would normally handle. That single fact is called magnetic levitation, or maglev for short, and it raises an obvious second question almost immediately afterward. Floating explains how the train manages to stay up in the air. It says nothing yet about how the train actually goes anywhere down the line at all. Why get rid of the wheels at all? It did not begin with someone wanting to build something that looked impressive floating above a track. It began with a much more practical limitation built into every ordinary train ever made. Wherever a wheel meets a rail, there's friction, and friction is never really free of cost. It wastes energy as heat with every single rotation of every single wheel. It wears down both the wheel and the rail slowly over time with every passing trip, and it becomes a genuinely serious problem at high speed, where vibration and mechanical stress both increase sharply the faster a train actually tries to go. Push an ordinary wheeled train fast enough down the line, and the wheels themselves gradually become part of the problem instead of simply doing their job quietly in the background the way they're meant to. Beyond a certain speed, keeping wheels safely gripping a rail gets noticeably harder, not easier, and the margin for anything going even slightly wrong narrows considerably as speed climbs. Engineers looking closely at that limitation eventually asked a fairly direct, almost obvious question. What if the train simply never touched the track in the first place, at any speed? No wheel-rail contact means no friction from that particular source at all. No mechanical wear slowly building up between two surfaces grinding against each other, trip after trip, year after year, and in principle, no fixed mechanical ceiling on speed imposed by how fast a wheel can safely spin and grip the rail at the same time. That idea itself is simple enough to state in a single sentence. Actually building a train that floats instead of rolling and reliably controlling exactly where it floats at every moment turned out to be a genuinely difficult engineering problem, one that took decades of sustained work to make practical rather than merely theoretical on paper. The payoff, though, was a train with an entirely different relationship to the track underneath it, one where the guideway isn't just something to roll along anymore. It becomes an active part of how the whole system actually works, rather than a passive surface the train happens to travel across. That shift in relationship from a passive surface the train simply travels across to an active participant in how the whole thing actually works turns out to matter considerably more than it might first seem on the surface. Staying up, then moving forward. So how do magnets alone actually hold a train up in the air? There are two basic approaches, and both come down to a simple idea. Magnets can either pull toward each other or push apart. In one version, magnets on the train are drawn upward toward the guideway above them, attraction holding the train suspended just below it, with sensors constantly fine-tuning the pull so the gap never closes completely and never grows too wide either. In the other version, the train's magnets and the guideway's magnets push against each other instead. Repulsion holding the train a small, stable distance above the track rather than pulling it toward anything. Engineers call these two approaches electromagnetic and electrodynamic suspension. The exact difference matters less than the basic idea itself. Whether the magnets are pulling the train toward the guideway or pushing it away from it, the result either way is the same small, deliberate gap where wheels used to be. Floating solves the contact problem completely on its own terms. It does absolutely nothing by itself to explain how the train actually moves forward down the line, though. The answer to that second question lives in the guideway itself, not really in the train at all. Coils built directly into the track carry electric current that keeps changing direction in a carefully controlled, precisely timed sequence, and that changing current creates a magnetic field that effectively moves along the length of the guideway, coil by coil, the way a wave travels down the length of a rope when you flick one end of it. The train's own magnets get pulled steadily along behind that traveling field, always chasing a magnetic pull just slightly ahead of where the train currently sits on the track. Speed up that shifting sequence along the guideway, and the train speeds up right along with it, staying locked to that traveling pull. Slow it down, or reverse the pattern instead, and the train slows down or brakes accordingly. Part of the motor, in other words, was never actually sitting on the train to begin with. It's built directly into the route the train happens to be running on. Not quite wheel-free, not quite unlimited. It's easy to assume a maglev train has no wheels whatsoever, at any speed, under any condition, on any system built anywhere in the world. That's not quite accurate. Some systems still rely on small auxiliary wheels at very low speed, before the train has built up enough motion for its magnetic fields to fully take over the job of holding it up on their own. Those wheels retract or simply stop mattering once the train is moving fast enough for magnetic force alone to do the work reliably, but they're often still sitting there underneath, quietly available for exactly the moment magnetic levitation alone isn't yet doing the job by itself. It's also tempting to assume that once wheel friction is gone entirely from the picture, speed becomes something close to unlimited, held back by nothing more at all than how much power engineers are willing to pour into the system at any given moment. That assumption misses something the wheels were actually hiding the entire time, quietly, without anyone noticing. Friction wasn't the only thing slowing a fast train down as it moved. It was simply the most obvious one, sitting right at the point of contact where anyone could actually see it happening. Remove it entirely from the equation, and a different resistance that was always there the whole time quietly becomes the dominant one instead. The air the train has to physically push through on every single trip. whether or not anything is touching the rails underneath it at all. The next bottleneck. A maintenance engineer schedules an inspection of the guideway's coil housings once a season, checking for hairline cracks that form not from anything the train's magnets did to them, but from the same coils slowly heating and cooling thousands of times a day as current pulses through them in sequence, mile after mile, whether or not a train happens to be running past that particular section at the time. A small research team runs early tests inside a short, sealed test tube with most of the air pumped carefully out of it the night before, watching a scaled-down vehicle inside reach speeds that would be genuinely difficult to sustain safely out in open air at any reasonable cost or scale today at all. A team of planners spends long months negotiating a proposed route through hilly, densely populated terrain full of existing towns, farmland, and long-established property lines, slowly discovering that building tracks straight and gentle enough for true high speed is often considerably harder in practice than building the vehicle that will eventually run on top of it. A commuter in Shanghai steps off a maglev line early one weekday morning that has been quietly carrying passengers to and from the airport for years now, without much fanfare or attention from anyone. A working, everyday system built specifically for one short, well-suited stretch of track, rather than an entire country's sprawling rail network. One machine, not one vehicle. A maglev train isn't remarkable simply because magnets managed to make it float. That part is genuinely clever, but it's only half the story. The real breakthrough is that the train and the guideway underneath it were never really two separate things working alongside each other. They're one connected system, a single machine that happens to have a vehicle-shaped piece riding along one end of it. Removing contact with the track solved one real limitation. It also quietly revealed the next one waiting underneath it. At very high speed, the air in front of the train and the sheer difficulty of building tracks straight enough to use that speed at all matter more than the wheels ever did. Building something genuinely faster was never just about building a better train. It meant redesigning the entire system the train depends on, guideway included. If this changed the way you look at a maglev train the next time you see or ride one, let us know in the comments below what you want us to explore next in a future video. We might make it our next episode. Thanks for watching. History often hides in the smallest details.